Good morning. Today we are going to start with an introduction to macroeconomic theory. What's macroeconomics and how macroeconomics affects our daily life? Macroeconomics is concerned with the big economic issues that determine our economic well-being. So it focuses mainly on the overall economic performance of the country. There are three main objectives for any nation. They are number one, decrease unemployment rate. Number two, keep inflation rates stable. And number three, increase economic growth rate or productivity growth. So the main task of macroeconomics is to study the behavior of each of these concepts, why they matter to individuals, and what the government can do in order to improve economic performance or macroeconomic performance in terms of these three concepts. So what are the basic consequences of each one of them? Or in other words, why do countries are concerned with these three concepts? Number one, unemployment rate. If unemployment rate is high, this means that individuals couldn't find jobs or find it harder to find new job. As a result, this will cause increase in crime, mental illness, and suicide will increase. So the country is concerned with unemployment rate as it has an economic and social impact, not only economic one in the economy. Number two, inflation. Inflation rate mean inflation means an increase in the general price level on average. On average, prices are increasing. So if inflation rate is high, this means on average prices are rising. Inflation has a negative impact on the lender and positive impact on the borrower. Also, inflation redistribute income between people. So countries are concerned with inflation rate as it will affect the spending pattern of consumers. It will redistribute income between individuals. It also will affect lenders and borrowers of money. So increased inflation rates means that there is uncertainty about the future. So people will be uncertain whether there is an increase in prices, so they would like to keep more money right now or to spend money. So it's not going to be a clear idea about the future. What about number three, productivity? Productivity means average output per hour of work. And in this case, we are going to talk about average output with respect to all workers in the nation in terms of hour of work in order to produce all goods and services. So the faster increase or growth in average productivity means that standard of living of individual is going to increase. So this means that there will be more houses, more cars, more roads, more hospitals and schools, etc. There is a special case of an economy with zero productivity, no productivity at all. This is known as zero-sum society. So zero-sum society is an economy with no productivity. It's not no productivity, it's no productivity growth. Which means that the growth rate is zero. In this case, if the economy would like to increase production of any commodity, production of another commodity has to be decreased. Say, for example, in order to build more houses, the economy has to sacrifice building fewer hospitals, for example. So in this case, all resources are fully utilized so that we cannot increase production anymore without decreasing production of any other commodity. Commonly, production And productivity is represented numerical by GDP. And the most important one is real GDP, not the nominal one. Real GDP means that it measures um, the market value of all final goods and services produced in a country during a specific period of time, while keeping prices constant or keeping prices fixed at the price of the base year. So real GDP is calculated as price of the base year or the reference year multiplied by quantity current year. Say, for example, in 2020, we would like to calculate real GDP using the base year 2015. So real GDP in this case will be calculated as prices of 2015 multiplied by quantities of 2021. Now we have to differentiate between actual and natural real GDP. What's the difference between both of them? Actual real GDP is the amount an economy actually produces at any given time. While natural GDP is the actual real GDP when inflation rate is constant with no tendency to change. So this can be represented graphical as this is time, this is inflation rate. It's fluctuating over time, ups and downs, okay, showing ups and downs. While, okay, let's draw it in another way. This is natural GDP, and this is actual GDP. So it can be realized that when actual GDP is lower than natural GDP, inflation rate is decreasing or slows down. While when actual GDP is greater than natural GDP, inflation rate is increasing or speeds up. And so on. So when actual real GDP is greater than natural real GDP, inflation speeds up or increase. When actual is less than or lower than natural, inflation rate decrease or slows down. While at the point where actual GDP equal natural GDP, inflation rate will be constant. So what is the relationship between unemployment and actual and natural GDP? When actual GDP is low, unemployment rate rises above its natural level. As you know that unemployment rate has a natural rate of unemployment, which is the normal rate of unemployment. Just returning back to unemployment and types of unemployment. As we said before, that there are three types of unemployment. Fractional unemployment, structural unemployment, and cyclical unemployment. Fractional means due to unemployment rate, which is due to normal labor turnover, which means that you would like to find a better job or a better salary, a better position. So this is fractional unemployment. And structural unemployment, which occurs due to technological improvement. And with respect to cyclical unemployment, it's related to business cycle. Which means that during recession, cyclical unemployment will increase, while during expansion, cyclical unemployment will decrease. Natural rate of unemployment means that cyclical unemployment is zero. So the only unemployment that exists during natural rate of unemployment is fractional and structural. This is natural rate of unemployment. So returning back to the relationship between actual real GDP and the natural and actual unemployment rate. When actual real GDP is low, which means that there is a recession in the economy, so there is a cyclical unemployment. So in this case, unemployment rate will be greater than the natural rate of unemployment. And vice versa, if actual unemployment, if actual real GDP is high, so this means that unemployment rate falls below natural rate of unemployment. And when actual real GDP equals natural real GDP, in this case, unemployment rate will be equal to natural rate of unemployment. Okay, let's illustrate this graphical. The upper panel is related to real GDP actual and natural, and the lower panel is related to unemployment rate natural and actual. This is natural real GDP, and this is natural unemployment rate. This is actual real GDP. And this is actual unemployment rate. As you can notice that when actual real GDP is greater than natural, actual unemployment is lower than natural. Okay, and vice versa. When natural real GDP is greater than actual, actual unemployment is greater than natural. Okay, when real GDP actual equal natural, unemployment rate actual equal natural. So from this figure, we can connect the three concepts together: unemployment, inflation, and real GDP. When actual GDP is greater than natural, in this case, unemployment rate is low, and in this case, inflation rate speeds up. returning back to the figure number 1, as we said, when actual is lower than natural, inflation rate slows down. When actual is greater than natural, inflation rate speeds up. Okay? And vice versa, if actual GDP is lower than natural GDP, unemployment rate is high, inflation rate slows down. When actual GDP equals natural GDP, unemployment rate equal natural rate of unemployment, and the inflation rate is constant. And this is the main idea of the business cycle. When we study business cycle, our main concern is to decrease fluctuations, to minimize fluctuations in unemployment rate and inflation rate. This can be a fluctuation, and this can be a fluctuation. So we would like to minimize the difference between the actual and natural instead of being a huge amount. Okay, so this is the main idea of studying business cycle, to minimize fluctuations, whether in terms of unemployment rate or inflation rate. So if we have these two different figures, we can realize that panel A fluctuates more than panel B. There is an economic failure in panel A compared to in panel A compared to panel B. Panel A volatility is much more higher than volatility in panel B. So what is the main idea or the main phases of a business cycle? Business cycle has 4 main phases, or actually it's 2 main phases and 2 turning points. The 2 main phases are expansion and recession. And the 2 turning points are peak and trough. Peak means the highest point reached by real GDP in each cycle. And trough is the lowest point reached by real GDP. Recession is an interval between peak and trough. And expansion is an interval between trough and peak. So graphical. This is a business cycle, okay? This is the peak. This is trough. This is the interval between peak and trough. So this is decreasing, which is recession. This is peak. And this is the interval between peak and trough. This is increasing, so this is expansion. So the interval between peak and trough is recession, and between trough and peak is expansion. Okay. So as we said that the policymakers should be concerned with stability of business cycle, or to keep fluctuations narrow instead of wide fluctuations. In order to achieve this main objective, the government can use two different policies. Either monetary policy instruments or fiscal policy. Monetary policy tools are money supply, and interest rate. While fiscal policy tools are government expenditure and taxes. So the government can use either tools of monetary policy or fiscal policy in order to achieve the three main objectives, which are to decrease unemployment rate, increase productivity, keep prices stable, or in other words, to taming the business cycle. Okay. This is the end of our lecture today. Later on, we are going to talk about monetary and fiscal policy in details. Okay, thank you. See you next week.